Amriteshwarye Namaha. Om Amriteshwarye Namaha. Om Amriteshwarye Namaha. Om Parthaya Pradibodhitam Bhagavata Narayanena Swayam Vyasena Gratitam Puranamunina Madhye Mahabharatam Advaitamritavarshinim Bhagavatim Ashtadashayatyanim Ambatvam Bhagavad Gita Bhavadveshinim Namostu te Vyasa Vishala Buddhe Pullaravindayata Patra Netra Yena Tvaya Bharata Taila Purnaha Prajwalito Jnanamaya Pradipaha Prapanna Parijataya Totra Vetraikapanaye Jnanamudraya Krishnaya Gitamrita Duhe Namaha. Sarvopanishado Gavo Dogdha Gopala Nandanaha Partho Vatsa Sudhir Bhokta Dugdam Gitamritam Mahata Vasudeva Sudam Devam Kamsa Chanura Mardanam Devaki Paramanandam Krishnam Vande Jagadgurum. Om Amriteshwarye Namaha. Thank you for joining us again today. We are still in the early parts of chapter 17, and we covered up to verse 4 last time. And when Krishna emphasized the importance of scripture in guiding our day-to-day life, Arjuna's thought goes to those people who cannot study the scriptures due to various reasons, but they have a faith in a religious or spiritual way of life. Thus, the chapter starts with a discussion centered on faith. Those who have no faith are not considered here, which obviously includes people who read scriptures purely as an academic pursuit but don't really have any faith in them. And of those who have genuine faith, this chapter starts with a division between people who have enough knowledge to follow the scriptural injunctions and those who do not. Now, Arjuna is not worried about those who have scriptural knowledge, assuming they will worship in accordance with the preordained ways. His focus is on what will happen to the people who worship without proper understanding. So far, Krishna has explained that if the scriptures are not the governing factor in a person's life, it will be their nature from past births that determine what they do, how they do it, and to whom they dedicate it. This is worshipping, actually. That innate nature, or what he calls swabhava, means their character, their mind, and the vasanas from previous births. Krishna further divided those past life vasanas into three categories: sattvic, rajasic, or tamasic. These words have come up many times before. Maybe you can look them up so we don't explain them every time. And he said that their faith will be in accordance with those vasanas. And we will go straight into a couple of verses that are usually chanted together, verse 5 and 6 together. As usual, I'll be chanting word by word, and then we'll chant it together slowly. Karshayanta sharirastam Bhuta Grama Chetasaha Manchaivanta Sharirastam Tanvidhyasura Nishchayan. Now together. Oh yes. Yes, okay. Sorry, going back to the I was looking at the second half of the verse, sorry. We'll start again. Ashastra Vihitam Goram Tapyante Ye Tapojanaha Dambhahankara Samyuktaha Kamaraga Balanvitaha. Now we're going to chant verse 6 again. Karshayanta Sharirastam Bhutagramam Achetasaha Manchaivanta Sharirastam Tanvidhyasura Nishchayan. Now together. Ashastra Vihitam Ghoram Tapyante Ye Tapojanaha Dambhahankara Samyuktaha Kamaraga Balanvitaha Karshayanta Sharirastam Bhutagramam Achetasaha Manchaivanta Sharirastam Tanvidhyasura Nishchayan. I did change a few things here, not much. Those who practice severe penances not enjoined by the scriptures, who are full of hypocrisy and egoism, and obsessed with desire and attachment, senseless as they are, torture the body and me dwelling within. Know them to be of demonic disposition. Now, for the commentary, today the commentaries are going to be very important for all of us. Shankaracharya says, severe means causing pain to himself and to other living beings. So it's not just penances for themselves, but it's also their giving pain to other people. And he says, full of, actually, he gives a description saying, this portion of the text may also be interpreted to mean possessed of desire, passion, and strength. So even though these words obsessed with desire and attachment are not in the actual Sanskrit of the verse, because Shankaracharya has spoken this way or given this commentary, I believe our Ashram Gita has incorporated it in the beginning. And then when he says me, he means Narayana, the witness of their thoughts and deeds. To weaken me is to neglect my teaching. Now here, you can imagine talking about torturing and things like that. Jnanadev has he's got a very long graphic explanation about how such people worship in very twisted ways, harming themselves and others. But I'm going to spare you those details. and I'll pick up after that description. Those who obstinately observe a complete fast for 7 days at a time to secure a boon from some petty deities, they are sowing the seed of torment for themselves and other tamasic people. Then the seed germinates and yields even more tamas. Such people get reduced to the state of one who finds himself in the sea, yet has neither the strength to swim across, nor does he use a boat. Like a sick person who is angry with the doctor and rejects the medicine offered, then suffers the pain due to their disease. Those who discard the scriptures with scorn act as their desires dictate to them. Not only that, they bury me deep, deep under the pile of boulders in the form of miseries, though I live as the soul in the body. Whatever afflictions they cause to their own bodies or to those of others, all cause exhaustion to me, the soul. Such wrongdoers do not even deserve to be mentioned, but have to be mentioned so that you may avoid them. And for that purpose, do conserve in all ways possible that sattva faith that I am now going to teach you. And he's going to teach in the next verse, but that's how he ends his commentary in this verse. And a more modern commentary suggests that the austerities practiced by the asurika people, that means the demonic people, are in no way pleasing to themselves. They lie on spikes, naked. They stand on one leg while keeping one hand up, hoping to acquire some mystic powers. They gaze at the sun constantly, unmindful of the harm done to their eyes. Their efforts are as painful to the observer as to themselves. So if you haven't seen any of these things, even Indians might not have seen these things. So this is actually happening. That's what I'm going to get to in a little while. The Lord residing in the heart as consciousness is denied by these demonic people. The one who is beyond happiness and misery seems to be subjected to misery at the hands of these crude people. They seem to have faith, but actually their practices are insulting. Now, in order to understand this topic of the method and motive of worship, we need a little kind of supplemental information. From Krishna's previous teachings, we know that sattvic methods and motives will always be peaceful and pure. There's no ostentation, there's no showing off, there's no bizarre self-punishment and so on. But there are some people who make a public spectacle about their self-punishment. You may have seen people like whipping themselves, they call it self-flagellation. And that can sometimes become a warped form of showing off or ostentation. Sattvic methods are more about devotion, naturally. You would expect it to be devotional, and there's bhakti, there's faith, and there's yearning for God. And they're more introvert than extrovert. Such methods are for the peace of all beings, avoiding harm to any being. In some, it is selfless. And the prayer is, may all beings be peaceful and happy. Loka samasta sukhino bhavantu. Through such an attitude, our mind automatically gets purified. The power of such worship is not based on how expensive it is or how ornate it is. It comes from the purity of our intentions, from the concentration, and the self-sacrifice involved, which means it's basically Amma's way. These are all concepts that have already been discussed in the Gita, or that can be easily inferred from the teachings up to now. So you can skim through those if you want to get back in touch with it. Naturally, when we look at the Rajasik method of worship, we would expect it to be quite different, and it is. In addition to all the pomp and show, they waste a lot of money instead of using it to help suffering people. Amma would never do such a thing. She tells the pujaris, what matters is, pujaris are the ones who do the ceremonies. It's your intention, it's your mind, it's your pure inner purity. You don't have to dump a truckload of flowers that cost a lot of money. So these people, are looking for name and fame, And they want others to know how much money they have, and they also compete with others too. If you look up the most expensive weddings, just most expensive weddings online, you will find the results rather appalling. One marriage, one wedding, 10 million, 20 million, 30, even over $40 million for one wedding. And all of them, almost all of them, ended in divorce. Just think how many lives they could have saved. Their ceremonies are mostly about getting recognition, but they don't intentionally harm others. That's an important thing. They don't do it intentionally. They're selfish, they're not sadistic. The tamasic version, which is really demonic, is about torture of the body. Not just your own, perhaps others as well. Extreme fasting, body piercing, self-flagellation, all these kind of things. So self-denial, to some degree, is common in every spiritual and ritual and religious tradition. But moderation is needed. Because we're doing it so that we don't become a slave of the mind and the body. For that, you don't have to go off the charts, just be completely crazy about it. Otherwise, it becomes another vasana, another fetish, another embellishment of the ego. Amma does recommend fasting once a week. But a long time ago, I remember a brahmachari in Amritapuri was sustaining a very strict fasting routine for over a month. He was senior to me, so I used to bring him a little glass of milk and 1 or 2 bananas. That was his meal for the day. But Amma told him to stop. She said it's going overboard, and the point is really just to control the tongue. Overeating and craving tasty food are the problem, not eating itself. So, I did this also. I fasted on Saturdays for 25 years. And then for a few years, I was just having rice and water on one day of the week. And that really helped me a lot. But I found only rice once per week was bad for my digestive system, so I stopped that. I wasn't so attached to it in that sense. And in the Puranas, like the Srimad Bhagavatam, there are stories of these Rakshasas, these very sort of twisted people torturing their own body, like standing on one leg for days together. And through this, they hope they will get a boon from some lower deity. But they only produce more bad karma for themselves and others. And that was thousands of years ago. In today's world, that lower deity, getting a boon from lower deity, that's just money. Today's world, because it's Kali Yuga. If you go to places like Badrinath or Kedarnath in northern India, you will see that some people are standing forever, and they even sleep like that. They just lean on some swing or something like that. But they get edema and their legs become swollen. People feel sorry for them or feel guilty or whatever it is, they give them some money. A sacred place which should be full of devotion, prayer, and bliss is turned into an ugly spectacle. That's sad. Here, Krishna says, not only are they torturing themselves, they are indirectly torturing me, too. Every time they insult the body, they are insulting the divinity in the body. So here, Shankaracharya has a rhetorical question, which means he poses it and then responds to his own question. How can anyone harm God? God is the Atman. It cannot be hurt. Therefore, whatever happens to the body does not affect the Atma. Yes. And then he responds to his own question saying, this has to be interpreted figuratively. It is not literal harm to God. Obviously, that can't be possible. And then that line, know them to be of demonic character, means both tamasic and rajasic people. So in chapter 16, we learned that asuras are worse than rakshasas. So if you have an asuric temperament, it includes the rakshasa temperament because the asura is worse. So it's like if you have an ingrown toenail and you have some much more difficult illness, then the ingrown toenail is not your biggest worry. So like that, the Rakshasa Swabhava or nature is not the biggest problem they have, it's the demonic character. But what statements in this verse refer to Rajas and which statements refer to Tamas? Because we like to think that we don't have a lot of Tamas. So let's see what the difference is. The Rajasic part of this verse is those who are full of hypocrisy and egoism and obsessed with desire and attachment. So I think all of us probably have to admit that sometimes we're hypocritical, we have ego, we have desires, plenty of them, more than we would like to have, and we have more attachments than we would like to have also. But when it comes to tamas, it is the portion where he says, those who practice severe penances not recognized by the scriptures, torture the body, and me dwelling within. Well, if you're doing that, you might want to rethink your type of sadhana. So with this, we now have 3 types of worship, 3 types of motive as well. In general, we should understand that sattva leads one to selflessness. That's the most important thing. They worship in whatever way that expresses their pure love for God. And the motive is selfless. So rajas is the step down, it leads to selfishness. And tamas leads us to harm others. So you go from selfless, selfish, and sadistic, or hurting other people. And then these are obviously indicators of the person's vasanas or their mental makeup. Here, Shankaracharya gives an introduction to the next verse by saying, next comes a description of food so that one may know if they are sattvic, rajasic, or tamasic based on their preferred food. One who craves rajasic and tamasic food can resort to sattvic food in order to change their vasanas. So if you find yourself struggling to change your vasanas, you can add to your arsenal of tactics and techniques a sattvic diet. And let's hear what he has to say about that in the next 2 verses, starting with verse 7. Aharas tvapi sarvasya trivido bhavati priyaha yajnas tapas tatha danam tesham Vedam imam shranu. Now together. Aharastvapi sarvasya trividho bhavati priyaha yajnas tapas tatha danam tesham bhedam imam shranu. Few changes here. Also, the food that is agreeable to each of them is threefold, as also sacrifice, austerities, and charity. Here there are distinctions as follows. So what I changed was the location of also, and it said only yajna, but I thought some people might not know what that is, so I made it sacrifice. And those of us who are from the Judeo-Christian tradition might find penance a little kind of overwhelming, but austerities are a little easier to accept. Both of them can be used here. Now Shankaracharya's commentary is just very brief. this word each. Each of them is threefold. It means every living being that eats. So it's not just about human beings, it's about worms, bugs, tigers, microorganisms, and so many other things. Now, Jnanadev's commentary in this part of the chapter kind of is overlapping because it's just his commentary, right? So as long as his singular commentary flows properly, it doesn't matter whether he kind of goes from verse to verse. But I took part of the commentary of verse 6 and I inserted it here because it was more on the topic of food. So those things that were about food, I moved it here. So this part I'm going to read to you from Jnanadev's Jnaneshwari comes from verse 6. You should always have association that is conducive to strengthening sattva and take only such food as would foster the growth of sattva, since there is no better remedy than food for strengthening the disposition. Wow, that's news for many people, I imagine. Conversely, Rajasik food affects the disposition negatively, like a sober person who becomes arrogant as soon as he gets intoxicated. So in other words, liquids are part of the whole gamut of food. So, people, if they drink alcohol, get intoxicated, then what's really on their mind comes out. So it's affecting them. Instead of trying to sublimate their negativities, they just blurt them out when they're drunk. So he's showing as an example that what you eat, what you put in your mouth and your stomach affects your behavior and your qualities. Having said that, don't go overboard and forget all of Amma's teachings. Krishna says that food is everything, so that's what I'm going to be doing that the rest of my life. Amma has a lot more challenging teachings that she gives us that require more effort. So we might be tempted to relinquish those and just focus on food, but trust me, it doesn't work. Then this is from the actual 7th verse commentary. Now I shall make it clear to you how one and the same diet becomes of 3 kinds. The preparation of the diet follows the taste of the one taking it, and the eater literally becomes a slave to the 3 gunas. The 3 gunas are sattva, rajas, and tamas. So he means that everything in the world is made up of these 3 qualities and a mixture of them. And so they are drawn towards those, their inner tendency that they themselves created from past births. And the same holds true for the 3 kinds of sacrifices, charities, and austerities, which we're going to hear about later. So through the previous verses that we read, Krishna has already answered Arjuna's question about faith. That was his question, it was about faith. But Krishna, for whatever reason, must have felt moved to discuss some additional topics, dividing them in the same way, sattvic, rajasic, and tamasic. And we can be very thankful for that because this is very helpful information for any spiritual seeker. And now that we know it is a top priority for us to convert our rajas and tamas into sattva, so we should be very interested in practical methods to reach that goal. So, once we realize that we're mostly rajas-based, we're mostly active and restless people, rather than being demonic or, like divine people, we have a ways to go, and we have to learn how to sublimate the rajas that we have, and he's going to teach us that, so we should be really interested. As a general policy, we should ask ourselves, if I do this, will it harm any living being? Would I be wasting time, energy, or money that could have gone to a higher purpose? We can apply that rule to our food as well. This awareness is what Amma is trying to inculcate us, not just about food, but in general. She's trying to inculcate in us, but it covers far more than just a few examples, like Krishna's just giving a few examples here. And this awareness is just one facet of sattva, cultivating the habit of remembering others' needs is a surefire way to increase sattva guna in our mind. So if you stick to that rule, then you can apply it to many very different circumstances. Even if I don't get any benefit from this, it is still worth it if others get some benefit. This is Amma's way. She's not getting anything out of staying extra late just to have some kids say things that you can't even hear because they can't talk properly. And it's so adorable for us. What is that? Amma doesn't need to do these things. Some people might get confused and say, oh, my son, he has to talk. Amma will be sad if he doesn't talk to every day. Amma doesn't care. She's helping us because it's helpful for us. She's willing and happy to do it. So that attitude that she has, if we cultivate that, it's a good way to relinquish our selfishness, which is basically what Rajas is, self-centeredness. In order to demonstrate how we can accomplish this, Krishna is going to use those 4 topics that we mentioned before, not just food, but austerities, yajna, which is sacrifice or worship of one kind, and charity, donation, offering your time and energy, etc. And he also continues to discuss them in the context of the 3 gunas, sattva, rajas, and tamas. So the descriptions that Krishna gives in his explanation are equally helpful in understanding other people's nature as well as our own. So if we feel a craving for something and then we think, wait a second, what kind of food is that my mind is yearning for? Because that's the kind of impact it's going to have on my mind. So it's good to know that that these things, what they do to us in our mind, especially. I mean, there's also other factors which we're going to hear about in the next verse, verse 8. Ayu sattva bala, Ayu satya bhalarogya sukha priti vidvardhanaha rasya snigdha stira hridya ahara satvika priyaha. Now this is a verse we should be interested in along with the commentary. I did change it a little bit. Foods that promote longevity, intelligence, strength, happiness, and cheerfulness, which are savory, buttery, substantial, and agreeable, are liked by the sattvic. So quite a few changes there. I turned vigor into strength, and sweet is also used, but I think the more common one is savory, so we'll include both. And bland, rather than bland, for all the translations that I have found are like buttery, and a word we don't use much, but oleaginous. And if you use that in your regular life, I would be very impressed. Okay. So Shankaracharya, his commentary, he just talks about what substantial means. He says it means that which lasts long in the body. Okay. Doesn't mean like eat a lot. It means that it keeps you feeling full for a long time. Now, Jnanadev's commentary is actually the most amazing here. And I have some leftovers from verse 6, and then I go to the verse 8 actual commentary. So from verse 6, he says, as nectar prevents death, and poison is toxic to the body. In that way, the sapta dhatu, in other words, the essential ingredients of the body, are formed according to the kind of food one eats. And according to the nature of these dhatus, thus formed, the emotions are nurtured in the mind. So it's like the domino effect. There's the food, and if it's sattvic, then that sattvic food affects the essential ingredients of the body, the sapta dhatu, and those sapta dhatus are what nurtures the emotions in our mind. And then he goes on to say, as the pot containing water is heated, the water in it also becomes hot. In that way, the thought waves in the mind are conditioned by the dhatus. That's what I just explained a moment ago. Therefore, when sattvic food is eaten, then only sattvic emotions are developed. That would be wonderful. Similarly, if other kinds of food are eaten, Rajasik and Tamasic natures are formed. Now we're coming to the commentary for verse 8. Should one be fortunately inclined towards sattvic qualities, their liking for sweet food increases. Don't just jump on that. Wait a second. Wait till we get to the end. Food greatly liked by those of sattvic nature are like the following items. And this is like a mouth-watering description, but I'm going to read it out because it's kind of funny. Food that is savory, sweet, well-cooked, well-shaped, soft to the touch, succulent, and flavory to the tongue. I'm adding a little theatrics to it. Full of sauce inside, with soft exterior, and the internal liquidity thickened by heat, but not overcooked. Small in size, but highly invigorating in effect, like a single syllable teaching from the mouth of the Guru, which, though small, gives immense internal satisfaction. Items that are as beneficial internally as they are tasteful to the mouth. Food possessing such signs should be known as sattvic food. It conserves longevity. When the cloud in the form of such flavory sattvic liquid food showers the interior of the body, the river of longevity enlarges day by day. That is, if you want to live longer, right? Like the sun makes the day advance, such a diet is most suitable for preserving the sattvic quality. Such kind of food is also a great support for strengthening the mind, as also the body. With such food, the ailments find no scope whatsoever to attack the body. In the long run, sattvic food thus proves great and beneficial to the body, both externally and internally. So when we say body, we're talking about the physical body and the subtle body, which is the energy level, the emotional level, and the intellectual level. A more recent commentary says, the food that adds to cheerfulness is also a promoter of appetite. The food that is substantial gives a prolonged sustenance to the consumer. Non-substantial foods get quickly digested, giving no vigor to the body. Food that is hard to digest weakens the digestive organs and reduces longevity. So in that same line, Amma says that we can have a really hearty lunch, but we should always try to reduce the food at night. And now that Jnanadev has opened the can of worms about the Sapta Dhatus, these 7, essential parts of the body, we do need a basic explanation of what they are and what they do. And since I am not at all qualified to teach Ayurveda, this is all Ayurvedic theory, I took the help of a resident here, and I'm going to share that. The 7 types of dhatus, the Sapta Dhatus, which can be thought of as the vital tissues, are in Sanskrit rasa, rakta, mamsa, meda, Asti, Majja, and Shukra, which in Western terms roughly correspond to plasma, blood, muscle, fat, bone, bone marrow, and the reproductive fluid, respectively. Each dhatu is nourished by the tissue that comes before it, which starts out as food. So in other words, the plasma or rasa is the first one, and from there, there's like a domino effect again, that they get influenced by the one before them. And it all starts with food. That's the amazing thing. That's why when you go for an Ayurvedic treatment, they always insist that you have a particular diet. So what about rasa? What is that? It is kapha-based, and 5 of the 7 dhatus are actually kapha-based. And the dominant element is water. It is aided by the mobility of vata, which is the kind of the air element. It circulates nutrients, hormones, and proteins throughout the body. So it's not just plasma, it's like also lymph fluid. Rakta is pitta-based, and it's the only dhatu that is pitta-based. It has fire as its primary element, not surprisingly. And its red shade is due to the presence of pitta. It preserves human life by transporting oxygen and nutrients throughout the body. So it's not just blood, it's also the digestive system, like we saw in chapter 15, when Krishna said that he is the fire, the digestive fire that abides in all beings. The 4th one is Meda, which is kapha, with water and earth as its dominant elements. It is solid and firm. It is the storage site for excess fat in the body, so it's mostly fat. Asti, actually believe it, I mean, you might not believe it, but most of these words are commonly used in Malayalam right now, even today. Rakta means blood, mamsa means meat, and then asti means bones, which is what they regarded even today in Sanskrit. So asti, surprisingly, even though it's bones, it's vata. It's the only dhatu that is vata, which is usually associated with wind and air, right? The air element. So it's kind of counterintuitive, but it supports the body's structure through the bones. Majja is kapha-based. It fills space like bone marrow and body cavities, etc. It also supports brain and nerve tissues and produces fluid that moistens eyes, the mucosa, skin, and stool. And the dominant elements here are, I believe, earth and water. And finally, we come to the 7th, which is Shukra, and that is also kapha. It is said to be, because it's the reproductive fluid, it's obviously the essence of everything, because without that, there's no life. So the essence of the dhatus is Shukra, and it is responsible for life, vitality, and energy. And what I found especially interesting is that plants have the same 7 dhatus also. And it is said that the same parts of the plant are used to heal the parts of the body, human body. So rasa, being sap, would be treating plasma, and mamsa, which is the flesh and muscle, it refers to the fleshy part of the plant. And asti, like the bones, would probably be like the cellulose fibers around the cell wall of a plant. So much for Sapta Dhatu. I'm not going to go in. Don't send me any questions online about that, because I'm not going to be able to answer them. I just want you to understand why Jnanadev threw that in there suddenly. So, verse 8 is it's the first of 3 verses about food types and their effect on us. Instead of describing the qualities of the food, he says that sattvic people prefer this kind of food, and then he's going to say the same thing about rajas and tamas. In other words, if we want to increase the sattva in our mind, we should eat the food that sattvic people eat. And the assumption here is that we can trust the food type as an indicator of a person's tendency. If sattvic people like this food, it must mean that it is suited to their temperament. So it's not a question of their name, last name, or like, you know, what they look like or what they say they are. You have to look at their character and their behavior. That will tell you whether they're sattvic, rajasic, or tamasic. Shankaracharya has also made a few conclusions, like I mentioned a little bit at the end of the previous verse. Let's say a person naturally likes rajasic foods. That means that their tendency is rajasic. Like I said, most of us are like that. We don't just sit down and meditate for hours and hours every day. Some people may, that's good. But if we cultivate a liking for sattvic food and train the body to accept it, then food becomes helpful in changing our entire mental makeup. For most of us, that means changing from rajas to sattva. Instead of passively allowing our present tendency to dominate us, we can proactively select the foods that support our spiritual goal. In other words, sattvic food. Now, keep in mind, however, the food is not a silver bullet. We cannot say that eating is now your number one sadhana. I stopped chanting my mantra, I'm not meditating anymore, I'm just eating sattvic food. And if you're wondering where all this information comes from, the Upanishads are older than the Bhagavad Gita, you should know. And Krishna always says that, his teaching is the teaching that has been there for untold years. So it's not that Krishna has to depend on the Upanishads, but there is a reference, similar reference in the Chandogya Upanishad. And you may want to look at that. I'll tell you something at the end of my explanation. It comes in Chandogya Upanishad, 6th Prapartaka in Khanda 5 to 7. There, sage Uddalaka explains to his son, Shwetaketu, how food sustains life in various ways, according to the key elements of the Jivatma, which is the individual soul. The earth element of the food nourishes the mind. The water element of the food sustains the life force, or we could say prana. And fire element sustains the speech, or nourishes it, you could say. So then he goes on to say that the effects of food are threefold. So he didn't say that earth, water, and fire are always good. It doesn't always have a good effect on a person. We have to understand what is good. So he says that the effects of food are threefold. One is on the physical level, which we could call the gross or physical level, or the stula sharira. And then the next level is subtler. We can call that sukshmam, which is we'll get to that. And the subtlest level is anishta. So we have stulam, sukshmam, anishta. Physical body, subtle body, and most subtle, that's not right. The physical level, subtle level, and the more subtle, the subtlest level. Then we'll move on to the next thing. We can say that the gross physical aspect of the food caters only to the taste buds. So it is physical body, but only the tongue. And that is soon removed as waste in the bathroom, basically. Thus, its value is only for pleasure. It doesn't contribute to the person's character. The subtler part, the second one, sukshma, provides nourishment for the physical body, not the subtle body. And just like how Western medicine explains that this vitamin is good for blood and these trace minerals are good for bones, etc., in the same way, the subtler part of the food doesn't make the food more delicious, but it is good for physical health. And the sattvalist part, anishta, nourishes the subtle body, the mind, intellect, and so on. And this knowledge you won't find anywhere except in the scriptures. Even Ayurveda is based on the Vedic scriptures, then thoroughly developed over thousands of years to become a holistic healing system that includes the health of mind and soul as the highest goal. One might wonder, how can any part of the matter-based, M-A-T-T-E-R, matter-based food have an effect on the mind and the subtle body? Because it's just matter. How can it affect the mind? Well, the answer is that, in truth, the entire subtle body is nothing but matter. It is subtler than the body, but still matter. If you missed that part of the class, you can revisit chapter 13 up to verse 7. I have a rather archaic English translation of that section of the Upanishad, but if you wish to read it anyhow, I have uploaded it, and the link should appear in the chat window soon. You just click on that link in the chat window, and it'll take you to a short excerpt from that Upanishad. And remember, the whole purpose of sharing this information is to further Krishna's part that sattvic food has a sattvic effect on the mind. For a seeker, both physical and mental strength are needed. We must have all felt that at one time. You have your mental strength, but your body is not keeping up, or vice versa. Either one makes it hard for us to follow our path. And without both, we may give up along the way. Just say, I can't do this anymore. Some people give up because of that. So definitely, pure blood, good digestion, and strong bones are a blessing. But Amma says that without the blessing of our mind, we cannot attain self-realization. So just to have a healthy body alone is not good enough. These days, people are very careful to read the labels on the products they buy. They want to make sure there aren't any toxic ingredients. Is it vegetarian? Is it vegan? And so many questions. But we often forget to take into consideration the subtle influences that it might have on our mind. Remember, processed food only became popular 100 years ago. Now, in the long history of Homo sapiens, you would imagine that that's a pretty short time span for a whole species. It means that until then, human beings were eating fresh or maybe pickled food. And probably in more recent years, like means the past 500 years, most likely it was a family member who made the food, and the other family members might even have grown the vegetables that were used, or if it was non-veg, it was like the animals that they raised. And the important point is that they knew the food was for their family. So the love in their heart would permeate the food they prepared. That's not going to happen when you go to Jack in the Box or whatever it is, right? Those loving vibrations would then permeate the mind, conveying a sense of loving care, security, self-confidence, and so many other mental qualities that are in short supply these days. Just think, if everybody were brought up with home-cooked meals full of love, made by a person who has some kind of devotion, who has some discipline, patience, humility, what kind of a difference it would make in the world. I can't help but think it would make a big difference. Maybe I'm wrong. And again, it's not just food, but at least food, at the very least food. These days, such a proposition may sound kind of revolutionary, but it was taken for granted just 100 years ago. Another topic that comes up when it comes to food, I have to touch on this. Ingredients like garlic and onions are praised for their medicinal properties, and rightly so. But then there are many people who say that they're not good for spiritual seekers. So why is there a contradiction? Those of you who use these things for your health, might wonder, why do some scriptures and teachers and gurus bash garlic and onion? Well, for the answer to that question, we have to remember the effects provided from each of the 3 levels of food. The 3 levels can be understood as being good or bad for taste, good or bad for the body, good or bad for the mind. So, from what I have understood, food is often only good for 1 or 2 of those 3 levels, not all of them. I have never found something that is really tasty, good for the body, and good for the mind. Or maybe some of the really good sattvic food. Yeah, actually, most of those hopefully qualify. But it's not the majority of what is being eaten in society. So even though some foods are medicinal for the body, they can have negative side effects for the mind. Just like you can have tasty food that's not good for the body, you can have food that is good for the body but not good for the mind. So an example, in Amritapuri, fortunately when I went there, I didn't know what a delicious idli tastes like. You know the steamed rice cakes, really soft, and you just go like this. It's just like a sponge. You put some coconut chutney on it or something. So I had never had any of those, so I didn't know what the flavor was supposed to be. And when on Tuesdays the brahmacharis were given idlis, and I just ate them just because they were a different food for a change, once a week. But then I heard some people kind of talking about how these ashram idlis are so hard. They're like rubbery, like a hockey puck or something, one Westerner said. And I said, really? What's wrong? And he said, well, basically what I found out was the black dal that is used to ferment the idlis is not good for brahmacharya, for continence, or for maintaining a life of a brahmachari. And that's why Amma doesn't allow them to use much of it. So it has a very small quantity of that there, just that people don't, kind of sacrifice their life of celibacy. So an Ayurvedic doctor or a Chinese doctor is correct in prescribing a certain diet for a physical illness. And Amma is also correct in avoiding the exact same diet, due to our spiritual illness, which is our vasanas and all the negativities we have accumulated over so many lifetimes. However, Amma will surely allow us to change our diet temporarily if we're sick. Doesn't mean you have that. If it's not good for your meditation and in your mind, then you shouldn't eat it every day, just when you need it for your health. Because we saw a few days back, Amma was telling the kids who just got over COVID that they could eat unfertilized eggs for a few days to regain their strength. Normally, she would never say that. So it's an exception to the rule. Another exemption would be based on a person's profession and dharma. Dharma means your responsibility to the society. Let's say you're a soldier in India protecting the borders in Himachal Pradesh in the winter. How are you going to get any vegetarian food? There's no vegetables left. Even if they don't like meat, they may have no choice. And it is also said that a non-vegetarian diet increases the rajas, which is actually good for a soldier. He doesn't have the luxury of contemplation on the self or doing regular yoga, puja, meditation. They have to be ready for war at any moment. So extra rajas is not a deterrent to their primary occupation. But after they retire, they might want to relinquish those things. And for a brahmachari or brahmacharini in Amritapuri, however, making food like eggs, garlic, and so on a regular part of their diet is a bad idea. Otherwise, they will develop a restless mind, be unable to focus during meditation, bhajans, and so on. Now, as a very long background, we can now enter into the actual verses. Now, let us see what kind of food sattvic people like. And Krishna has 10 points. 10 points. Like that boy in Amrita Puri, so cute. The first one, longevity. Sattvic food leads to a sattvic temperament. And as a result of that, we will experience more mental equipoise, which means less emotional roller coaster rides, and less restlessness and less tension in life. More relaxation, less ups and downs leads to a longer life. Then our sattvic mind will lead us to things like yoga and meditation, and that further extends our lifespan. Our translation is intelligence, I think, in the translation, but it also can mean purity, because the word used here is sattva, which means both. It can be understood as sattva guna, the quality of sattva, or as mental strength. Yeah, we have strength in our translation. So we can understand that as mental strength. And the next one is vigor, which is also another kind of strength. But here it means physical strength. The previous one was mental strength. Here it's physical strength. And it is a foregone conclusion that the food is good for the mind, so it should be good for both physical and mental strength. So when we talk about the sattvic food, it should support both sides of our being. And some people may ask us, how do you get strength without eating meat? I like the saying that people use in India, which is, if you want to become as strong as an elephant, eat what the elephant eats. That doesn't mean you have to eat cocoa palm leaves. It means a plant-based diet. And if people think that's not going to get you very strong, well, there are plenty of vegan and vegetarian bodybuilders who never use steroids but look just as muscular as any other bodybuilder. It's not that we're going to go do that, but I mean, if they can get strong with it, then an average person like us could do it too, because we're not trying to win any, contest. Meat definitely does contain protein, but it also contains a lot of tamas, and that is going to change your whole personality, so it's good to avoid it if you can. Then health is mentioned. Naturally, because the wrong diet can lead to a host of diseases like high blood pressure, heart disease, diabetes. Basically, the metabolic syndrome, a lot of it comes from lack of exercise and the wrong food. But with sattvika food, there is no addiction, because the food itself leads us to a balanced lifestyle and self-control. If you're eating pure food, you're not going to have this tendency to eat all one thing and eat too much of it. It's going to make you have a mind that understands or reaches for a balance in the diet. So that sattvic food leads to a balanced lifestyle and diet. Now the next two, happiness and cheerfulness, go together, so I'll read those, I'll explain those together. What is the difference between happiness and cheerfulness, one might ask? Happiness, we can use the word sukha, and cheerfulness, we can use the Sanskrit word priti. So priti stands for the pleasure of eating. So it's kind of a cheerfulness. You eat something, that was tasty. Sukha means we feel happy even afterwards. You could call it the happiness of the culinary variety. It's not going to solve all your problems in life, but you feel good even afterwards. But there are types of food that taste good, but you don't feel good afterwards. That means there is priti or cheerfulness, but no happiness or no sukham. Sattvic food has both, Priti, happiness. It's both makes you feel cheerful and it gives you a feeling of happiness. That is Sattvic. The seventh one is sweet in our translation. I've seen a lot of other texts translating it as savory, which sounds like the opposite, but we can assume it's both. Generally, sweet is associated with sattva guna, but don't use that as an excuse to overindulge. A half cookie is also sweet. Doesn't mean you have to have a big handful or huge amount just to taste that sweetness. I'll tell you a funny story. One of the Amma kids, I like to call them, grew up around Amma and became a doctor, just like all his other family members. Was driving in the car with us a long time, must have been like 1994, 1995, when we were driving in a car across the whole country. And he was maybe 14 or 12, 13, 14, somewhere around there. And he's now over 6 feet tall, so he was really in a big growth spurt. And there was a box of cookies in the car. And there were about 5 of us there. And we handed it to the driver. First we had like 8 hours to go, so just killing time. And then the passenger seat person got it next. They handed it back to me, and I handed it to this. Finally, the end of the box ended up with this teenage boy. And then after some time, we just looked over at him, and he was like just like a dog that had eaten all the food in the bowl and in the house. And he says, "Oh wow, I ate the whole box." So you don't have to go that far unless you're a teenager and your growth spurt. We Swamis have to be very careful because people bring sweets and high-calorie foods all the time. So everything has to be in moderation. As it says in chapter 6, verses 16 and 17. Yoga indeed is not for one who eats too much, nor for one who does not eat at all. O Arjuna, it is not for him who is too much given to sleep, nor yet for him who keeps awake. For one who is moderate in food and recreation, moderate of effort in actions, moderate in sleep and waking, for them is the yoga that destroys sorrow. So if you want to destroy your sorrow, keep moderation in all ways. Our translation of the next word is bland. I have seen more like oily or buttery kind of translations, because the word is snigdha, which literally means things having oil or ghee. But maybe that kind of makes the flavor a little bland, so you don't get attached to the taste, perhaps. Oily and ghee tasting foods are called sneha, and when you mix them into the food, we call it snigdha. Basically, the meaning is that the food should not be dry. There should always be some degree of ghee or healthy oil, like coconut oil. So just be careful that it is not soaked in oil. So if you like samosas, consume in moderation. And the food should be substantial. That means that the food nourishes the body. So we heard about the strength of the body, and this is more about the sturdiness of the body, how solid it is. And finally, agreeable means that which is pleasing to the eyes. Now, I'll tell you a story that happened to me in Singapore a long time ago. The local coordinators put together a wonderful I Am technique meditation weekend. And they were doing a great job. And when we had our first lunch break, we went upstairs. It was in a Buddhist temple, really nice atmosphere. We went up one floor, and that's where the food was. And so they served the food, we said the prayer, and then everybody started eating. And I was a little busy talking with a few people that had questions, so I didn't start eating my lunch until people were about 15 minutes into their lunch. And when I went over and I looked at the food on the table, I was horrified. Fish, chicken, meat, all these things, and they had a plate already made for me, and then here's your lunch. And I was like, I didn't want to hurt their feeling. I said, okay, thanks. And I pulled the main coordinator aside and I said, what is this? What are you thinking? Are you crazy? And he said, what do you mean? You're serving meat. He said, no. It's not real meat. It's fake fish, fake chicken, fake meat. And he said, have a bite. I mean, just to test, I did take a couple of bites. But just looking at it, I couldn't eat it because how can I eat something that looks like this? And but it was fake. It was all fake. So that's not very inviting for someone who's a general vegetarian. That's why foods that are too reddish are sometimes not encouraged, because they look like meat. But some people don't care, it doesn't matter. And perhaps it is an old belief, but the concept is that the food should be pleasing to the taste, smell, and senses, including the eyes. So I'd like to show you a few slides of what really nicely arranged food looks like. And just bear with me for a few minutes here. All right, let's see. I took this one, the first 2 or 3, from our own Amrita Prasadam class subscription, which is on Amrita Virtual Academy. Okay, very nice and colorful. Next one. Wow. Yeah, this is South Indian food. Very nice. Okay, next. This is some vegan dish. Very beautiful, different, colorful, and healthy. Okay, next. And this is made of some kind of mushroom, and it's like a work of art. It seems like some kind of sculpture that somebody put in front of City Hall or something like that. Okay, next one. Yeah. Now this is a kind of a pseudo-Japanese dish that looks very, very healthy. You have different colors. You've got that inviting-looking drink, and just very well done. And then the wasabi with the green nuance to it as well. Okay, next. Japanese sweets. Yes. This is nice. You have these cookies that look like flowers, and you have little sprinkles on top, and everything is just so aesthetically pleasing. And before you get to the next slide, I'd like to say that the next one is America's contribution to pleasing looking food. Okay. This is a jackfruit burger. Fully vegetarian. I think it's even vegan. Okay. So this is the section on sattvic foods. And you may feel like some of those kind of foods you're already eating, but then you might think, I wonder what the other 2 types of food are, so I can make sure that I don't go towards those or try to reduce my consumption of those. So that's what we're going to find out about next week. And today we have quite a few questions. That's why I'm saving about 15 minutes to address them. Just give me a moment, please, to pull it up. Here it is. Okay. So the first question that I'm going to address today is actually the third and last question that I was supposed to respond to last week, but due to unforeseen circumstances, I couldn't do so. The question is, the more I listen to scriptural classes, the less interest I find myself the less interest I found myself in the knowledge system based on different subjects as scriptures talked about ultimate truth and wisdom and knowledge. Grammar's a little difficult. Basically, I think what they're saying is, without reading everything, more they study scriptures, the more they find it difficult. And I'm not sure if it is the right attitude, and what attitude should I have towards worldly knowledge, and how I could adjust myself. My response, because I didn't quite gather the impact of this question completely, you're free to resubmit it if you'd like to. But my feeling was that if you focus on bhakti, on devotion, prayer, mantra japa, bhajans, and meditation with form, you, in time, a deeper understanding of of the philosophical roots of those practices will become clear to you, as well as the importance of worldly knowledge. So when we talk about worldly knowledge, it can be beneficial, it can be self-purifying if you use it for a good purpose or a selfless motive. So, but all these things need the power of bhakti behind them. Otherwise, unless you're tremendously strong within you, we get tired, we get taxed when we do these things, and we find it hard to continue. But if you have Amma in your life, and you focus on her and your love for her and her love for us, then all these things take place in due time. That's all I can say. There's a question from about 2 weeks ago. What is the significance of the recent Homa, Shivam Sundaram? The scriptural significance. You might have seen that 108 female disciples were doing tremendous homas and pujas in Amma, homas actually, fire ceremonies, in Amma's headquarters, Amritapuri. So, but I would have to say that there's no specific correlation to a specific scripture. Actually, Amma is rewriting the scriptures. That's what it is, as it should be. Over time, things need to be updated. It's 2022. A lot of the scriptures are thousands and thousands of years old. So she is coming up with the Amrita Upanishad. I mean, not literally, but every word she speaks is the Amrita Upanishad. That's what Awakened Children is. That's what all these books are. That's all, every morning we're getting Amrita Upanishad. So it is well known that over time all religions are affected by human interference in various ways. So by doing this, anyhow, the world needs peace desperately. And that's enough of a reason to have 108 fire ceremonies going on at the same time. But in addition to that, Amma is adding in this factor of having her female disciples doing it. So there were a few articles that came out which were sometimes interviews, with the ashram. So the more official version of it I can share just from what I understood. It's a Vedic ritual for world peace, everybody knows that. And that is Amma's sankalpa. So Amma's sankalpa, that through this ceremony, it doesn't have to be 108, she could just have it be one fire. But for us, we feel so overwhelmed when we see that just huge, it's like bigger than a soccer field, full of fire ceremonies. Makes us feel really touched. The Ganapati Homa, Navagraha Homa, Mrityunjaya Homa, and at the end, Amma comes and leads everybody in a meditation for world peace. So what more can we ask for? There were 108 sannyasinis and brahmacharinis, who are the female lifelong renunciates. And a message was given: women should be empowered to lead from the front. That was conveyed to the world through this yajna, or this ceremony. And Amma said, in this time of war and the pandemic, we all need to recharge our minds so that good may come to all, and peace may prevail throughout the world. So she's not only furthering the cause of world peace, but she's also furthering the cause of women's empowerment. So that is the significance as far as I can see, or as I believe, or what I think is correct. Now there's a question that came from somebody. They seem to be a little bit mentally tormented about something. They don't mention exactly what. And the question is, how does one get out of hell? I am worried that I sold my soul. I hope and pray that is not the case. Amma said she wanted to be my guru years ago. Can she help me? Well, first of all, Amma doesn't say she wants to be somebody's guru. She never tells anybody, I want to be your guru. She will be your guru if you want, and if it's appropriate, you know, for you, not for Amma. Amma doesn't have any restrictions like that. She took a leper in as a disciple, or like a devotee, I guess we could say. So yes, you can become Amma's devotee. Don't worry about that. Now about hell. In India's tradition, hell is something that we ourselves create by our thoughts, words, and actions. It's not something that happens just randomly. And it can be when we're in a human body, or it can be experienced when in between births in different dimensions. But whatever it is, it's not something that somebody else did to us. It's not like an angry God is doing that. We don't have that concept in India. But because it is a product of our thoughts, words, and actions, that also means that we can change our fate as well. We don't believe in eternal damnation in this tradition. And the reason is that our actions have a limited effect. They're not unlimited. They're not infinite. So how can a series of limited actions contribute to us being in eternal damnation? It has to be limited because the source is limited. So don't think that it's going to be eternal. Anyhow, people do feel and experience hellish circumstances on this planet. You don't have to sell your soul to the devil, or such things to do that, because people are starving in many parts of the world. They have barely enough to live on, sometimes not enough to live on. Sometimes they lose their children because of that. So many people are suffering in hellish conditions already. So we don't have to go somewhere to see that or understand it. So when we find it difficult to do the right thing in life, it is best that we take refuge in a realized master like Amma and pray for their guidance and protection. I feel that you are in exactly that kind of situation, so it is a good time to ask Amma to become your guru. And in other words, yes, Amma can definitely help you. You can ask for the link to see Amma's daily program, and I'm sure that will help you boost your spirits and purify your heart. The last question is actually two questions. I'll try to finish on time. I whittled it down to the essence. My question has to do with vows. Do more sadhana and fast on days like Ekadashi. This is what Amma says. So the first question is, while we are taking a vow of silence for the day, should we not chant the names aloud, not sing bhajans, not chant any mantras before we eat? I have heard that it is okay to do these things while being silent, but wouldn't we be increasing our ingestion of the polluted air? Amma says that at certain days, certain parts of the moon's phases, the air is polluted, or the atmosphere is polluted. And this person said, also I read that the 11th day of the lunar phases happens twice a month, Ekadashi. Is that correct? Okay. The answer to this that I have is that you can certainly chant mantras and sing along with the bhajans if you wish. The reason for observing silence in the first place is because it has a silencing effect on the mind. The same goes for chanting mantras and singing bhajans. They quieten the mind, just in a different way. So all such sadhanas support each other. Singing bhajans is not counteractive to your silence. So just be careful not to talk in between bhajans because you are singing and such other things. You know, you might forget if you're singing, but I think you won't because it calms the mind to sing bhajans. And regarding this polluted air question, you should understand that it's not physical pollution. Amma is referring to subtle vibrations that come from people's thoughts. Our thoughts are what are polluting the atmosphere, but you cannot see it, you cannot measure it. The evidence of it is that society is falling apart. That's the proof. So all these negative thoughts and tendencies that we have are contributing to the subtle pollution of the atmosphere. So she's not referring to oxygen, which is always good for you. Oxygen is our friend. And yes, Ekadashi comes twice a month, once each when the moon is waxing and waning. And the moon's cycle is 14 days waxing and then 14 days waning for a total of 28 days. And this the ancient people knew because they looked at the sky. But these days, I think a lot of us forget what that means. And the second question is, I heard that saying the 1,000 names of the Divine Mother and the 108 names of Amma should normally be done out loud. Should this be strictly followed, or are there allowances? For example, reading the names silently on a plane if you have to travel for the day or you don't want to wake up anyone. Okay, very sincere questions. I'm impressed. So about Amma's Ashtotram, the Sri Lalita Sahasranama, Amma does say that it is best to chant it aloud because it is those vibrations are not only attuning your mind to sattva guna, but also they're purifying your surroundings and maybe even your next door neighbors. You don't know. Amma does said it's better to chant it out loud. And when you are alone, you may not notice the difference, but when more people chant out loud together, you immediately feel the power of group chanting, and that's out loud. And don't think that practicality does not have a place in spirituality. Amma loves practical spirituality. It's not just blind spirituality. You do what is practical. So just because chanting out loud is good for us, we need not disturb people on a plane or wake up those who are sleeping peacefully, because that is himsa. It's like a subtle kind of injury that we're giving to other people. They're sleeping blissful and we say, Om Parashakti Namaha Om Parashakti. I mean, that's kind of selfish and injurious to others. And if it's on the plane or at home, even your partners or your kids or your pets even, you might not want to annoy them by doing that. It's up to you. But it doesn't have to be out loud when other people's peace and quiet is at stake. Compassion and consideration of other people's needs are also fundamental qualities that we have to observe. An easy way to sharpen your judgment is to just put yourself in the other person's position and ask yourself, how would I want others to treat me? So let's say you're sleeping on an airplane and somebody like the Muslims also chant their things 5 times a day, right? So it's time, the sun's just about to come up, and so I have to do my namaz, and then they start doing it really loudly on the airplane. We won't like it either, because we're sleeping or resting, whatever it is. So it's a simple golden rule. just follow that, and all the answers will come to you pretty clearly. Okay, that is it for questions for today. And for once, exactly on time. And with Amma's grace, with her protection and help, I hope to do this class again next week as well. And I've been announcing the 10th anniversary of Amma's Chicago Ashram at the end of the class, but for those who don't have time to stay on until the end, I'll say it now. Our 10th anniversary is going to be celebrated in mid-May, and I think there's a slide that'll come on top of my face instead of, let me see if we can get that to come up. Yeah, great. So you can see it. Oh wait, yeah, sorry. We're going back and forth, guys. 1 second. There you go. There it is. Friday, May 13th through Sunday, May 15th. And this is actually going to be a wonderful celebration for everybody, because we're going to make it a celebration of not just the ashram itself, but all the activities that Amma has told us to do and that we've been practicing here. And also we can all join together and watch Amma's morning program together, which we rarely ever do, or if at all. And laughing and meditating together is just like going to be wonderful with Amma live. So it doesn't get any better than that. With those words, we will conclude the class, and we will chant the first two closing prayers before we stop and move on to the meditation. Om Asato Ma Sadgamaya Tamaso Ma Jyotirgamaya Mrityorma Amritam Gamaya. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Om Lokaha Samastaha Sukhino Bhavantu. Lokaha Samastaha Sukhino Bhavantu. Lokaha Samastaha Sukhino Bhavantu. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Om Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. Harihi Om. Om Amriteshwarya Namaha. Those of you who have time, please join us for a brief meditation. Check your posture and try to keep it as straight as possible. Close your eyes and slow down your breathing process. With each long, deep inhalation and exhalation, you feel your mind and body relax further and further. Feel Amma's subtle presence all around you, her warm embrace, and the light of her love shining within you. Now direct your awareness to the rhythmic flow of your breathing process. Feel the harmonious flow of your breathing process through each and every inhalation and exhalation. Gradually shift your awareness to the overall health of your body. Are there any areas of concern? Do you feel something unnatural about any part of the body, starting from the feet, ankles, shins and calves, knees, thighs, hips, lower back and abdomen, upper back and chest, shoulders, arms, hands, neck, and the whole head and face. If you find any points of concern, make a mental note of that and try to find sattvic foods that will strengthen or relieve the disharmony in that part of the body. On the level of the subtle body, the discomfort that we feel physically appears differently in the form of restlessness, negative thoughts, weakness, mental weakness, and so on. The way we can identify such symptoms would be by examining the day, each day, to find where our mental weaknesses or weaknesses of the subtle body exist. Was my pride injured? Did someone speak to me in a direct way and hurt my feelings? Did I get stressed over a deadline? Did my overeating or undereating affect my mind? You can take a moment to reflect and make note of such effects on the mind. Noting those tendencies, we can strive to maintain a more sattvic diet, to decrease the problems we have in the subtle body. Now let us conclude with the final prayer. Take a deep breath. Om Purnamada Purnamidam Purnaad Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnameva Avashishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Om Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. Harihi Om. One more long, deep breath. And as you exhale, you can slowly open your eyes if you wish. Om Amriteshwari Namaha. Thank you all for joining us, and I hope to see you next week. Namaskar.